we're now getting into our People, Power and Politics session, and we have Professor Susan Booysen from the School of Governance at Wits University for her take on the state of the nation as well as developments at the Constitutional Court. Thanks for coming. It's lovely to have you in studio. We're always chatting to you on the phone. But let's start off with state of the nation. What would you say was achieved last night by the president in terms of swinging public sentiment domestically and communicating to the international community?
You know, it was a tick box exercise, really. He knew what sentiments to express, somewhat more austerity than what we have been used to. Look at some institutions, refer to state-owned enterprises and acknowledge, yes, some work needs to be done. And he ticked all of those boxes and referred to important policy areas, referring to the economy, what is wrong in the economy, the poor growth rate, underperformance, need for more industrial action, etc. So there was a little bit of each of references to each of those core areas. And yet one went away from that having the feeling that this president has not engaged with these very serious issues. Of course, it is a State of the Nation address. It is a little bit of a shopping list,
yes.
Refer to everything, and the rest will follow in the individual budget votes. And in 12 days or so, 12 days, yes, the budget, big national budget, much of those details will follow then. But still, it could have been more pointed, more accurate to the specific problem. So many other problems were simply not acknowledged. And we're in an era where we're looking for frankness and brutal honesty.
It's a time also when you want the bad news given to you and say, things are bad, we want to do something about it, and a sense of leadership. One did get a sense of a man under pressure, and the lack of dignity, the fact, the term I used earlier was the state of the nation address, watching. We knew it was going to happen. The speakers, the joint speakers, couldn't control it. My sense was maybe if they'd taken a sharp grip on it right at the beginning and said, get out, maybe that would have provoked some kind of violence. But for an hour, for the State of the Nation address not to be allowed to continue, it was just a lack of dignity, wasn't it?
There is a certain lack of dignity, yes, but I believe there's also a certain lack of dignity that has been brought onto the Parliament. Parliament has been exposed to lack of dignity in not interrogating our president when it came to the big issues of Nkandla and other issues before that. I believe there is not much dignity if people don't interrogate their own president, if they do implement all kinds of commissions, in committees go in and affirm and protect the president. For me, there is just no dignity in that. So in a way, a lack of dignity in the demeanor of the economic freedom fighters, that is the state of the nation.
But a lot of people would take a look at the EFF and the fracas that they created for an hour and actually say, thank goodness that we have somebody like the EFF who's actually going to stand up and be the voice that we cannot be sitting at home. So surely there must be some positivity in terms of the contribution. Oops, there goes my pen. The contribution.
Getting excited again.
The contribution that they're making in terms of deepening democracy in South Africa.
Unfortunately, I think you're perfectly right. They did make a big contribution to exposing that. So they've come a long way. I know later we'll talk about the Constitutional Court. If it had not been for them and had it not then been blocked in the National Assembly, then they wouldn't have taken it to Constitutional Court, but they did. And through that, they really brought a measure of accountability, which we have been sorely lacking. So they have really been expressing a lot of popular sentiment. And even if it was obstructed in that assembly, so people really appreciated it.
I wasn't implying that they shouldn't have done it, but
Yes.
to say it does reflect something that's happened. But
yes, no, for
again,
sure.
and reflecting on the authority of the State of the Nation and of the President. Now, you mentioned the ConCourt, we might as well get to it. We had this astonishing spectacle of the President's senior counsel, Jeremy Gauntlet, saying, actually, we should have obeyed the public protector, and the police minister and the parliamentary subcommittee implicitly were actually wrong to exonerate him. I mean, this was a complete about-face, and again detracts from the authority of the office, doesn't it?
Exactly, that was a jaw jaw-dropping experience to observe that, the volte-face that happened there. And what is even worse than that, the fact that the president did that, he left so many of his own followers and loyalists in the lurch, in the National Assembly, those people who have been staffing those committees, in the National Executive, the Nathi Nhlekos, the Thulas Ngcesis, those poor people, in a way, not poor, because they brought it onto themselves as well. But it was a turnaround, and in a constitutional court, we saw that the council, for example, for the Minister of Police and for the National Assembly, they had not, quite obviously not even been briefed on this turnaround that Jeremy Gauntlet, Senior Counsel for the President, and the President had brought up.
And they were literally speechless at times. They had no answer.
They did not have, they weren't prepared, they didn't have the logic or the arguments. There was no coherence in between those three councils.
I'm still perplexed about what this means for the credibility of the public protector. And I'll tell you why, because it appears as if when it suited the president to ignore her rulings or her recommendations and run parallel processes, that's exactly what he did. And now that it serves him again to acknowledge the public protector's report, this is now what he does now. And I get the sense that we've been reading it incorrectly as South Africans, as this is a victory for the public protector. Actually, to me, it's dangle when we need you and sit down when we don't need you. I don't see how this translates into power for her.
I would still think in the end it does, because the president has capitulated on this. And if he would dare go back and now denounce her pronouncements again, that would reflect on him rather than on her. She has been through a lot, including being told she's a CIA agent, and the name calling there has been incredible. And this is, I really believe, a de facto apology. They're not saying they're sorry, but they're saying they were wrong after systematic 2-year-long denouncements.
So the question has to be asked again, and it's been asked increasingly, is President Zuma has strong survival instincts, but perhaps the ANC has stronger survival instincts. And there comes a point where it says we've got municipal elections coming up, we've got another 2 years, we've got big elections in the country, 3 years. We've got interim, we've got ANC elections. At what point does the president become a threat to the survival of the ANC in Johannesburg, in Port Elizabeth? And in other words, at what point do they say, if they do, we don't want you to be president anymore?
I have had it on good authority that he's been told we will allow you to see out your term. Granted, that comes from ANC people who are his followers, the ones who put him in place there. But apparently, and that one never knows when there's another faux pas or a gross mistake and he plunges the ANC into further decay. He has probably not been affecting the ANC to the point of taking majority status away from them. But he has been doing a lot of damage to the ANC. One could also think about it in a way that perhaps it could even be, relatively speaking, of course, good for the ANC, in a sense that here is a person who has done so many things wrong. And it's almost like an ill but can be extracted from the party, and then the party can say, we have exercised that. Now it's a new ANC, but it would need a new and a strong national leader in order to do that. That could be an effect, that people overcompensate the ANC just for eventually, even if it's in 2 years' time, 18 months or so, to get rid of this president. But people could overcompensate for that. So it is give and take, and weaknesses and strengths at all sides.
And there's also been the view that we're very unlikely to see Jacob Zuma being recalled as president, because if we begin to be the country that recalls as presidents, that then actually contributes to an actual instability overall. And what we need to show in this particular term is that we can work through this and allow him to see the term to an end. I mean, this is what I've been hearing, but to what extent does that align with some of the key thoughts that would come from a political analyst's point of view?
Yes, the ANC will probably get through this relatively well, but there is so much damage, and it's a reflection on the party that they have put a leader like that in place. But then, as you correctly say, they do not want to get the reputation that we deal with our leaders by recalling them. There is a measure of political certainty, policy certainty that the economic community is still calling for. And at least now President Zuma has been put in a position where he's probably going to try to be quiet and push forward advance.
For the next 3 years, I don't see him being quiet.
Maybe what's happening is that we haven't wasted a good crisis. There was a crisis in December which wasn't expected, which was unnecessary and caused enormous damage to the reputation and to the markets and so on. But we haven't wasted the crisis, if you think about it. Pravin Gordhan is back as finance minister. Business and government are talking intensively. There are a lot of good signals going on there. So that brings us back to the budget. So we've had the State of the Nation. The budget signals are actually going to send the political rather than the economic signals.
Yes, definitely. Although the economic ones will be very important as well.
But politics to support the economic.
Exactly. But think of it too, Pravin Gordhan is taken as a great savior now. And yes, he is a vast improvement, especially as an immediate predecessor. Nene wasn't doing too badly. But it was also in that period of 2009 until 2014 under Pravin Gordhan where he really gave into a lot of the pressures to escalate the budget deficit, to bring in more populist attention and much more for increases in the social wage, in the social grants, for example, extending it, which of course one cannot say do not do it. This is a nation of vast unemployment and poverty. But it was under his guidance that the economy came to many respects to this phase it is in now.
Thank you so much for your time. Your insights have been just absolutely phenomenal. That's Professor Susan Booysen, and she's from the School of Governance at Wits University.